Howdy, Connection Group leaders. Happy Thursday. It's been a while since we've gotten to do this, but I'm thrilled to get to talk to you today. You might be wondering, I've already been asked a handful of times, TJ, have you worn a Rangers shirt nonstop since they won the game last week? And not nonstop, most days. In fact, today I wasn't wearing a Rangers shirt, but then Jeff Keck dropped this one off in my office, and of course I had to wear it. So, and I love that dude. It's just love the team. You might be wondering, is TJ's love for sale? A little bit, sometimes, yeah. So anyway, I am seriously, it's excited to talk to you all today. We get to look at Abraham, and some of you may be thinking, man, didn't we just talk about Abraham a few weeks ago? And we did. We looked at the Abrahamic covenant, but we looked at it briefly. Today we get to look at it a little bit more in full. So kind of take that approach this Sunday. Next week we're looking at Sodom and Gomorrah, so that's a whole new thing. In fact, that'll be a whole other pretty big lesson. We haven't talked about that in a long time. But approach it from that standpoint. Yes, we just talked about this a few weeks ago, but let's look at it a little bit more in depthly. I think that's going to be good. So, Genesis chapter 12. God has started the process of making his people, but he starts off with Abraham. And he comes to Abraham, who, by the way, we're not entirely sure whether or not Abram. I'm going to say Abram and Abraham interchangeably today. Just roll with me, please. We're not entirely sure of any kind of established relationship that God had with Abram until at least this very moment, when in chapter 12, God calls out to Abram and says, hey, Abram, come out from among your family. I'm going to make a new nation out of you, and I'm going to give you a land, and I'm going to bless the people who bless you and curse the people who curse you. I'm going to make your name great. Now, here's the thing, and I've made this point to the students. In fact, we've been talking about Abraham some on Wednesday nights already, so this is also familiar to them, but I think it's worth looking at even more. Abraham already had nearly everything that God had promised him. He already had a great name. He already had many possessions. He already had a good chunk of family wealth and land. So none of those things would have been particularly appealing to him. Maybe the whole thing about, I will curse people who curse you. He couldn't do that himself. What struck his fancy, what caught his attention, was just that statement, I'm going to make a nation out of you. Because the only way that a nation could be made out of him would mean that you have to have descendants. It's the only way that can happen. And we all know at this point, he has no descendants. He's 75 years old, his wife is 65, and they can't have children. This is the one thing he couldn't have. This is the one thing, even more specific, you got to catch this. Other gods have not been able to grant to him. So the sole God, Yahweh, comes to him and says, Abraham, I can meet this need. In fact, I can meet this need in a greater way than you could ever imagine. So come out from among them. Leave this place that you're at right now. Walk to a place that I'm going to show you, which is just a wild but such a cool command. Just start walking. I'll tell you where to go. Leave your family, and I'll do these things. And sure enough, he does it. At least almost. Don't miss verse 4 of chapter 12. It says, so Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him, his nephew, right? So he almost completely obeyed. He left most of his family, took Lot. And it could have been a situation, Lot wasn't a little boy, by the way. Get that image out of your head. He's already a grown man. And the way that we know that is the very next chapter, we see that Lot already has a lot of stuff on his own. We don't get the impression he's married yet. That'll come next week with Sodom and Gomorrah. But he's already a pretty wealthy dude himself. For whatever reason, he followed Uncle Abraham. But that wasn't part of the deal. Abraham, leave your family. Nonetheless, they leave. They show up in the promised land, and God says, hey, you're here. God affirms his promise. Abraham builds an altar, worships God, and then they carry on. Now, the very next chapter really is important, because that's the chapter where Abraham and Lot separate. And it wasn't even from a standpoint of, okay, like I really need to obey God, so you go over there. It was just a practical thing, but nonetheless, he did obey. Lot, we need to separate. Pick wherever you want to go. You go that way, I'll go the other way, right? And as soon as he does that, and you know the story, chapter 13, Lot picks the best looking plot of land he can. And immediately when Lot and all of his stuff leaves, God speaks up to Abraham, man, I'm going to bless you. Everything you see, I'm going to give to you. I'm going to make you a great name and a great people. You will have descendants. So God reaffirms his promise. But that makes chapter 15 all the more significant, though, when you understand that final piece of the obedience thing that's going on here. When God shows back up and he says, hey, Abram, again, fear not, I'm your shield. Your reward will be very great. So God affirms the promise again. This is actually where they make the covenant itself. And he says to him, hey, like again, I'm going to give you land. I'm going to give you a people. I'm going to make a great name out of your descendants. And then there's this wonderful verse. Catch this. Don't ever miss this. This may be the most important one. Abraham believed God, and God counted it to him as righteousness. See, sometimes we delineate between the Old Testament and New Testament how things worked, and there's really not. Man, faith is just the same today as it was back then. There are things that God tells us, and we believe him. And we believe him not just like affirming, yeah, okay, that makes sense, but believe with our actions, right? So Abraham believed God with his actions, and God counted that to him as righteousness. That's what makes us righteousness. It's the work of God and the things that he declares over us, and ultimately the work of Jesus. And it's our faith in Jesus that makes us righteous too. Very, very cool stuff. So excited about talking about Abraham. Just excited about being back in the Word together, period. So love you guys. Have a fantastic weekend. Go Rangers. Jesus won. We'll see y'all soon. Bye.